Alright, so today I want to introduce you to the African import ball python. Essentially what an African import is, it's either a wild-caught ball python or it's a captive hatched ball python. And essentially the way they get the captive hatched is they collect the females from the wild and wait till the females lay eggs. And then what they do with the females is they let them go back into the wild, then they incubate and hatch the eggs of the female, getting your captive hatched African imports. And I actually went over to Morphmarket.com. I was looking through some of the African imports that actually lists it as a gene over on Morphmarket, and I saw one that was selling for $20,000 for a normal. They just list it as a normal ball python. And let me tell you, when you gamble on something like that, you can either strike it rich or you can lose a lot of money. And the one I actually saw over there was pretty mind-blowing and had a pattern like I've never seen in any other ball python. It definitely looked like a new gene, although I've seen some people spend tens of thousands of dollars on some of these African imports, and they'll take that snake and breed it to something else over and over and over, and it won't prove to be genetic, meaning they can't reproduce the visual appearance of the parent. Sometimes you can lose a lot of money, and if you actually discover a brand new gene, especially if it becomes really popular, you can definitely make some pretty good money. So it's definitely a big gamble on some of these African imports. So what I want to do is I want to jump over to the internet and I want to show you some of these African imports and some of the ones that I might gamble big time as far as investing in a new project. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on Morphmarket.com and I want to start with just the normal classic wild type ball python, so you can kind of see little subtleties in these African imports as far as what you might want to take a chance on. As a matter of fact, if you actually look at the African imports, the prices are all over the place. Sometimes they're like really super expensive and sometimes they're really inexpensive. As a matter of fact, if you're actually looking for a really inexpensive snake and you're just kind of browsing the normal ball pythons, what you might want to do, instead of searching for normal for the cheapest snake over here on Morphmarket, you might actually search for the African imports, like the captive hatched ones, which is, it's kind of amazing. You can actually pick some up for almost the same price as a normal, and sometimes you can gamble on new genes in the African import. So if you actually take a look at this one, this is just a regular normal, what you'd expect as far as the normal color and pattern of just a wild type ball python. And usually you actually see these little, like a Roswell gray alien heads in the sides, and sometimes you can actually see some of the patterns are a little bit jumbled up. And usually as far as like the stripes is another thing you can kind of look at. And this one you can see just a little bit of stripe right behind the head. Usually they're not really that striped. I've actually seen some normals with a stripe on kind of the back of the tail. And as far as the colors, it's usually a pretty black background. And usually on the normals, they have like a pretty solid head color. They don't really have a lot of pattern on the head. And a lot of times on the normals, if you actually flip them over and look at the belly, a lot of times they actually have, sometimes they'll have a little speckling here and there, but they won't have like tracks or anything like that. It's pretty like a normal colored belly if you actually look at a bunch of normals. Sometimes the normals can have some interesting bellies. And a lot of times you can actually look at the bellies or the head stamp, the pattern on the head, or you know, the pattern on the snake or the color of the snake in general to figure out if there's potentially another gene in the mix. And that is really what you want to look at when you're looking at African imports. So I actually wanted to start with this one right here. This one is just blew me away. Take a look at this one. This one is so crazy. This is an African import, which is kind of crazy. I was actually kind of reading the description on this, and what they did is they took an African import and bred it to another snake in their collection. It was actually a desert gene, and they popped out this crazy snake, which is probably one of the wildest ones I've ever seen. I haven't seen any gene in ball pythons that looks anything like this. It almost looks kind of jumbled up like a leopard or something like that. And if you actually look at the head on this one, it almost looks like it has the head stamp of a clown or something like that. It's probably one of the craziest ones I've seen. And this one was actually listed for $20,000, which, you know, if I was actually gambling on an African import, it would probably be something like this. And the sides almost look like a puzzle or something like that. It's like a really crazy wild pattern on this one. It's pretty amazing. I actually pulled up another one over here. Take a look at this one. This one really blew me away. If you actually look at this one, it has a stripe right down the top, all the way down the whole top of the snake. This is another African import. And the thing that really surprised me about this specific African import, take a look at the price on this one, $100 for the snake. And let me tell you, I've actually seen some similar dinkers or African imports that looked like this that were selling for thousands. Actually, I remember one that I actually stumbled into, and it looked almost exactly like this. It was selling for $10,000, which is kind of crazy, and someone actually bought it. So it's pretty unusual for a ball python to have any type of stripe all the way down the back like this, especially for a normal. Sometimes you'll see it on like a super stripe ball python or like a genetic stripe or something like that, and usually on those combinations you'll actually see kind of a wiped out pattern on the side. So this is kind of interesting. It actually almost has kind of a gold color to it too, which is, it's a pretty wild snake. This is, let me tell you, if this one was still for sale, this is one I would definitely consider investing in as far as gambling on an African import. And let me tell you, you're not really gambling that much at $100. It's pretty amazing. And it's kind of interesting. This one's actually a female at 1,042 grams. Maybe, well, it's actually, so typically you breed them at about 1,500 grams. Some of these that may be low priced like this, for example, if this was actually a male at 1,000 grams, it's possible that the breeder actually took the male and bred it to a whole bunch of stuff and never reproduced the visual appearance of the male. But this being a female at, you know, under 1,100 grams, usually they're about 1,500 before you breed them. So I'm thinking this one's probably never been proven out at all at this light of a weight. It's a pretty amazing snake. So I thought this one was pretty interesting. This is another African import, and look at the color on this one. It has a really light color and a really scrambled up pattern, and it has a lot of blushing on the side of the snake. It's a really interesting African import. I was actually looking at some of the other pictures, and look at the stripe coming down the back of the snake. I don't think I've ever seen a stripe coming down the back of a ball python that's as thick as this stripe. It has a really chunky stripe right down the back of the ball python, which is really unusual. It continues almost all the way down the whole snake. And actually they showed another picture here of the bottom of the snake, and this is pretty interesting too. It actually has these tracks coming up and down the sides of the belly, and there are some genes with tracks. Usually you don't see those on normal ball pythons, and kind of the genes that I think of as far as the tracks on the belly of the ball python, one of them is the orange dream. The orange dream can have tracks like this, but usually it's an orange color. The het pieds can also have some tracking like this along the belly, although most het pieds, if they just have one copy of the recessive pied gene, a lot of times the tracks don't come all the way up the snake like this, which is kind of crazy. And this one had a pretty good price on it. You know, sometimes, you know, people have these and they know what they have and they sell them for a pretty good price. This one actually sold for $3,500. So this is actually a $3,500 normal that you're gambling on. This is going to be genetic when I breed it to something else, which is can be kind of risky if you actually jump into a project like this, but sometimes it can really pay off. So I actually pulled up a yellow belly. Speaking of belly patterns, sometimes you actually find these snakes like this one has some checkering on the sides of the belly, and some of these genes can be incredibly subtle like the yellow belly. And any of the genes in the yellow belly complex, like the gravel or the asphalt or the yellow belly or the specter, so all those genes are in the yellow belly complex, and if you actually breed two of them together and get two genes in the yellow belly complex together, you can make some really amazing combinations. I actually pulled one up over here. This is the combination of the yellow belly and the asphalt. Makes this really stunning snake, which is pretty incredible as far as, you know, taking two normal looking snakes and breeding them together and getting something like this. So this is actually the black pastel leopard freeway, probably one of the craziest looking freeways. So essentially this looks almost exactly like a regular freeway, except it actually has the black pastel, which is a dark gene, and the leopard, which is another dark gene. Really darkens the background, which is really crazy. And it has kind of this wiped out electric pattern on the side. Usually you get some of this like electric pattern on some of your freeways, but the black pastel seems like it kind of wipes it out into this kind of like a lightning strike right down the side. And then look at the stripes on this one. This is like one of the newest combos that I've never seen over here. It's just kind of an interesting, you actually see the striping on the back, and that is typical of some of your leopard combinations, which will put some striping on the back. So that's the potential of what you can do with, you know, really subtle jeans like the yellow belly and the asphalt. So I thought this one was kind of interesting too. Take a look at this. This is actually another African import. They're selling it as a normal, and take a look at the color on this one. It has kind of this rusty reddish brown color on the whole snake. Pretty much has the same pattern as a normal, although it's completely different as far as the pattern. As a matter of fact, I actually have kind of a dinker project here in my collection. I have one that looks almost like this, that is kind of this rusty color, and then all the kind of the alien heads on the sides are really big and patternless with no patterns or granulation inside of it. I actually bred that one to a coral glow, and I got a really crazy offspring that could potentially be a new gene. Sometimes these projects can be multi-year projects because you're, you know, it takes a while for the females to develop, so you're actually just waiting for the females to age and mature before you can breed them, which is kind of the hard part. But if you actually look at the price on this one was only $250. Let me tell you, I would probably gamble on this one for $250, being a pretty incredible color as far as kind of an unusual colored African import. So here's another one. So this one's actually listed as a captive hatch import. So this one, they actually took the eggs from a female that they collected in the wild, hatched the eggs, and got something like this. And a lot of people on these African imports, they'll show the bellies. And I would say it really takes a keen eye as far as trying to figure out, all right, is this actually something or nothing? What you could actually do is you could go over to some of the normal ball pythons, or if you have someone that has normals, or look at the bellies of some of the normals in your collection and see if you can compare that to this and see if there's anything in here where you think there might be a gene as far as something being in here. But if you actually look at the top of this, I thought this one was kind of unusual, because if you look at the side, this is kind of interesting. It has this line right down the side of the snake where the lightness comes up to from the bottom and just stops right in the middle of the snake, and the top of the snake is dark here. Sometimes you can actually start looking at your normals and you're like, I think there's something in my normal. I think I might have something here, when in fact it's just a regular normal and you never really reproduce it, which I'd say probably 90% of the time it's not genetic and you're not going to reproduce it. But some of these, if you actually look at the price on this one was $45. And let me tell you, if I actually found something in here for $45 and I was looking for a really inexpensive snake and I saw something that might be kind of interesting, maybe a new gene, I would definitely pick one of these up compared to buying just like a normal ball python. So here's another one I thought was pretty interesting. Here is a male African import with a ringer, and sometimes the ringer is an indication of one copy of the pied gene, a het pied. Sometimes ringers can be pretty random, but I thought on this one it was kind of interesting, the pattern coming up the sides. You really don't have tracks, you have almost like this flaming coming up the sides, which is a pretty interesting belly on this specific African import. If you actually look at the prices on this was only $50, which is kind of crazy. Let me tell you, these are I would definitely invest in some of these if you're just looking for an inexpensive snake. So here's the last one I wanted to show you. This one is kind of an interesting looking African import. You can definitely tell on this one it's a lot brighter, almost like a really bright orange color. You can see a little bit of highlighting. I'd say some of your normals actually have a little highlighting, but you can definitely see on this one it has a wiped out pattern. As far as the sides, I've actually seen some normals, so on some of these you're just kind of gambling if something's actually in here or not. And from an African import, I'd say you probably have a high probability of possibly getting a new gene. Alright, so it is time for the question of the day. And Lauren Anderson asks, What temperature would you recommend not surpassing for ball pythons? That is a very good question. So it's kind of interesting with temperature. When I first started in ball pythons, I actually got most of my information from YouTube videos, and I was watching all these YouTube videos and taking notes on every single video. And one page I actually had the recommended temperatures for breeding ball pythons, and to my surprise, it seemed like every single video that I saw on YouTube had a different recommended temperature. Some were really high, some were really low. Some people would actually adjust their temperatures during breeding. Some people keep the temperatures the same year round. And I actually found one YouTube video that he was pretty sure, almost 100% sure, he said that if you actually increase the hot spot to above 95 degrees, that your male ball pythons would be temporarily sterilized because you get a significant reduction in the amount of eggs from his females if you had the hot spots over 95. So I'm not sure how true that is. I only saw it on one video, but I pretty much tell everyone, as far as the hot spot, I would definitely not surpass 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.